First bill on today's agenda is House Bill 127. This is the House's version of the transfer bill. You'll recall that the Senate transfer bill was used as a vehicle to start the CARES Act funding process. We're taking the House bill, we're reinserting, this is a strike all, we are reinserting the Senate language that we passed initially into the House version. Went over that last time. It clarifies some EEF funds and tobacco control funds and deals with balancing the budget, bringing forward capital expense fund, and leaves in the language for the transfer bill. There also includes a reverse repealer in the bill. I'll yield for any questions. If not, is there a motion, title sufficient to pass, strike all? All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The next two bills kind of go hand in hand. The first one, House Bill 263, is a clarification. Last year, you remember we passed a 3% pay raise for various employees, and unfortunately, the language in 37-1389 was not amended to reflect the 3% pay raise. So this is simply, this and the next bill are clarification bills that show that the pay raises were made. This one is for school attendance officers. Is there any questions about House Bill 263? None? Motion is title sufficient to pass. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 264 is also, this is the Highway Patrol and the Bureau of Narcotics. Same thing, that this bill just conforms the language of the statutes dealing with those two sets of officers to reflect the 3% pay raise that was provided last year. Motion is title sufficient to pass. All in favor say aye. Title sufficient to pass. Actually, this was like, although it's got a repealer in it, but I think that came from the House. Anyway, motion, title sufficient to pass. I think all in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Next bill is 524. This is requested from MEMA. This will allow them to access some funds that would add a section for housing grants up to $250,000, and it adds a new sections that municipalities and counties can apply and receive funds for debris removal. And then on line 38, it allows an increase from $500,000 to $1 million, and the maximum amount would be from $1 million to $2 million on the increase for the Disaster Assistance Trust Fund. Questions about this proposal? This is a strike all. Motion, title sufficient to pass, strike all. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The next bill, 721, is the rural fire truck bill. We had a companion bill that we passed. Senator Hill's bill was passed in committee. We didn't take it up on the floor because of the House had already passed their bill, and this bill has a reverse repealer in it. It's typically one we take to conference to look at the amounts of funds that are available for the rural fire truck acquisition. But this is something we've already considered before, at least in committee. We didn't take it up on the floor. Questions about this measure?
Chairman.
Yes, Senator Delano.
Thank you. I see that there's some edits that are in here. Are we just expanding this particular program to allow for more trucks to be purchased under the provisions or the guidelines of the program?
Yes, and more dollars too. Numbers and the amount of money that goes along correspondingly with those numbers, yes. But this is, I would say this is one that will still be up for consideration depending on, and there are a couple other bills that could deal with the rural fire truck acquisition. So,
but there's no money in this bill.
This is one we need to keep alive, and certainly my hope and expectation is we'll have some funds for this, but it's not, got some work to be done.
Okay, so but there's there's no money in this bill. This is just the rural fire truck program itself.
We'll have to have an appropriations, separate appropriations bill.
Okay, and that money usually comes from, or has been coming from, the wind pool?
Well, that's, I think Commissioner Cheney has used some of those funds from the wind pool. Yes, yes, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Delano. Any other questions about House Bill 721? Not, the motion is titled sufficiently passed, strike all. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The next bill is House Bill 1434, and I will call on Senator Branning to explain that bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of this bill is to revise the salary threshold that determines the status of full-time or part-time law enforcement officers, and this one specifically applies to deputy sheriffs and municipal police officers. What it will do is give the flexibility to these law enforcement agencies that want to hire part-time officers. Under the current law, I believe the threshold to be considered part-time is like $250 a week. Any amount over that is considered full-time, and then you see counties and municipalities that have to pay the benefits that go along with that. A lot of law enforcement officers make extra money by maybe working full-time for one agency and then picking up a part-time employment somewhere else. So this bill just gives them the flexibility to do that. I spoke with my sheriff this morning in Link just to be sure I understood what he was trying to do, and he said it does two things. It helps these agencies hire qualified law enforcement officers that otherwise work in other departments, and it allows these men and women to make a little more money. So I think it's a win-win, and I did look at the vote in the House. There were no dissenting votes, so everyone agreed that this is a good idea all across the board. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Branning. I recognize Senator Wiggins for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quick, and I know we're in appropriations, but we've had, in Judiciary B, we've had a lot of discussion about liability and part-time officers and what they're doing. Is there anything related to the liability that we need to be aware of in this bill, or is it affecting that in any way?
This has no effect on any liability whatsoever. This particular code section only deals with compensation. So whatever the existing law is and however that is handled will continue to be the case after this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions? Hearing none. Senator Branning, do you have a motion?
Title sufficient to pass.
Motion is title sufficient to pass. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Next is House Bill 666. I will call on Senator DeBar to explain that measure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 666 comes from education, and all it does on lines 43 is add 7th and 8th grade back to the gifted education. It was in law at one time. It was removed, and this just adds it back into the law, and it still has to be subject to the approval of the State Board of Education. There is a cost to it, anywhere from $5 to $8 million. More than likely, if this bill passes this committee, we get to the floor, we'll add a reverse repealer to it, just to keep it alive, just to see how the funds look at the end of the session. But just wanted to keep it alive. If we put the reverse repealer in now, I have to go back to education, and there is not an education meeting scheduled, so the bill would die. So I'll yield for any questions at this time.
Just for clarity, Senator DeBar, this will be an education first bill, so you will handle this on the floor.
I will.
And you will ensure that the reverse repealer is put in this bill?
I will, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Are there questions of Senator DeBar on this measure?
Okay. Title sufficient to pass.
Motion is title sufficient to pass. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Next, House Bill 667. Again, I'll call on Senator DeBar to explain that bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 667 comes from education as well. This is almost identical to a bill we passed last year for the School of Arts. This applies to the School for the Deaf and Blind. It allows them to be a local school district, so the State Board of Education can delegate control over contracting and procurement to the school. And however, the State Board of Education would still have a committee to approve all of these, but it delegates all their functions to the School for the Deaf and Blind. It will be effective July 1st of 2021, And it also allows for the School of Arts an extra 6 months to transition to become this local school district. There is no appropriations or extra appropriations that I'm aware of for this bill, even though it was double referred to this committee. But I'll yield for any questions if anybody has any.
Anybody have questions for Senator DeBar?
If none, title sufficient, do pass.
Hearing none, seeing none, the motion is title sufficient, do pass. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And Senator DeBar, will move to 1165, and call on you again to explain that bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. 1165, as it comes to before this committee, is a bill to mandate computer science be taught in schools. However, there is a reverse repealer in the bill, and the only reason that we've kept it alive and passed on education and I'm asking to be passed under this committee is it could be used as a vehicle for the CARES Act. The bill in its present form will not come up unless it's needed and will be modified to reflect CARES Act language, general bill language. That way the general bill language is not in appropriations bills. This would be a separate bill solely for CARES Act. If it's not needed, then I will not be bringing it up on the floor. So, but I'll yield for any questions if there are any.
For benefit of the members, keep in mind we passed yesterday or day before the education appropriation bill. I guess it was yesterday, the education appropriation bill that deals with the CARES Act funding for all levels of education. But this would be the general bill, as Senator DeBar explained, the general bill if we needed to put some teeth into what the requirements would be for distance learning. That's what this is there for. Anybody have any questions? If not, Senator DeBar, your motion.
Title sufficient, do pass.
Motion will be title sufficient to pass, strike all. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Is Senator Barnett here? I don't think we can pass on that bill for now, 1377. We'll move to 1387, and I'll call on Senator Parker to explain that bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for inviting me to your appropriation meeting today. A little bit different than the finance atmosphere, but House Bill 1387 was double referred to myself and to appropriations. It has become the vehicle for workforce development utilization of the CARES Act money. And what you have in front of you is that strike all that passed our committee. And so there has been some requests from workforce entities in Mississippi. There's been an ask of between $130 and $150 million for workforce development training. This bill is kind of a start to that. We put as a starting number in there $50 million as just kind of an opening act here. We're going to hopefully be able to refine that a little bit here. The reason we're doing that and refining it, as the chairman has so well explained on the floor, we continue to get new federal regulations and guidelines on how we can use that money, and we want to certainly, as this process goes on, give ourselves every opportunity to shore up every need that we have as a result of coronavirus. But this bill effectively acts just like Senate Bill 2772, our small business grant program bill. It transfers $50 million from the CARES Act into a special fund to be known as the Restart Mississippi Workforce Development Fund, which will be administered by the CJCs in collaboration with the Department of Workforce Development. The legislative intent is for those people who have been either underemployed, unemployed, or will have to seek different employment as a result of coronavirus to be able to get some training to get them back into the workforce as we see the end of the year kind of move forward here. The intent is to try to decrease any duplicative expenses, and it also asks the agencies to act in haste. It requires the CJCs to work in concert with SWIB and the 4 workforce investment areas, the local economic developers, to determine the best way for the funds to be met to meet the requirements of the CARES Act. And it only is using 0.5% of the money for administration. There's a line on there to allow the board to retain $250,000 for administration, which I think the chairman and I feel is a very reasonable number there. It does subject the CJCs and the department to the oversight, as you would expect, to make sure this reaches the appropriate sources. Some eligible expenses through this will be items like computers, tablets, or other devices, software learning management systems to assist in distant learning, eligible student financial aid and tuition for workforce development programs, infrastructure necessary to increase capacity in workforce development programs, and any items necessary to increase health and safety as a result of COVID-19. We have not had any specific appropriation for workforce needs to the CJCs in over 5 years. They have done a wonderful job in meeting these needs, and they are going to have a yeoman's task ahead of them to try to put some of these people back to work. And just as personal commentary on that, what I anticipate seeing is that there are many people out there who are receiving assistance right now who fully expect to be able to walk back into their jobs when normal returns. But in particular areas of the state, I don't think normal is going to return the way they anticipate. And I'm hopeful that this piece can allow the CJCs and the workforce development to provide some training to get them into a vocation that might better suit the changing employment needs of the state as we move along here. This has been very well received by the CJCs. I hope to have their complete support as we move this along here. And there is a provision in there that we've given some discussion to, that if the money is not utilized by a certain date, I think we have November 1st in here, that money would be reverted back to the governor's office to be used instead. On the floor, just to give you heads up, I plan to make an amendment to maybe move that money to MDES to help shore back up MDS as we kind of find out what their total kind of reduction in their trust fund is as we move along here. So, but anyway, that's an explanation of the bill. I'll yield for any questions if you have any.
Any members have questions? No questions? Senator Delano. Senator Delano.
You brought up the unemployment insurance trust fund.
Yes.
I've heard some discussions that we may need to change the formula as it pertains to the assessments that are made back to the property or to the employers. Has there been a discussion in that? And I know that doesn't have anything to do with this bill.
In my understanding of the CARES Act, there's some misunderstanding on what we can do with some of the CARES Act money. My understanding is that some of those funds can be used to build back up the trust fund. When I had MDS in front of my committee a couple of weeks ago, we asked that, and we didn't really get what I consider to be a good enough answer for me to tell you in confidence what the true answer is going to be. But my hope would be that we don't put a new burden on our employers and start raising those rates at a time where they're doing everything they can to try to get employees back. So as we move along, that's why maybe adding that amendment on the floor, maybe doing that and maybe some other bills, and I'll be glad to talk to the chairman about that more as we kind of move through the process, might be a way where we could effectively build the trust fund back up and eliminate that need to shift that burden onto the employer. So I hope not to see that. And if anything, I'd rather see those numbers go down over short term to help our employers make that difference.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. If no other questions, I think Senator Moran had the motion, title sufficient, do pass, strike all. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Parker, and we will surely meet again. We'll get back to 1377 at another time, and might have one or two others we have to take up, but hopefully not too much more. Hearing no other business, the motion, Senator Wiggins, is to rise and report. Rise and report. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much.